is haram, evil, right? You're not supposed to have music. Yes?
What's that one song played for us and it was like, it wasn't supposed to be good? It was from like Japan or something.
What's that?
Oh, Kyoto music.
Yeah. that's the
Court
one.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's meant to scare people so that they
Yeah.
don't look at the nobles as they pass. That's a different thing.
Oh.
That's using music as a weapon almost, right? Music is one of those things that is pleasurable, so it's haram. And so are virtually any other kinds of pleasures. And by the way, I don't want to get in trouble, but seeing a beautiful woman with not much on, depending on for if you're in Iran, right, the argument over whether you wear the veil, etc., right? Seeing a woman's hair is too much pleasure for a male. So, that's haram. You shouldn't show your hair, if you're a female, right? I'm not making that up. That's like the whole point, right? And so they can say on the one hand that women aren't allowed out, and if they do go out, they have to have a male escort and they have to be covered. It's all actually to protect the woman from males that have no self-control.
Like in Islam, it's only your dad and your husband can see your hair.
Your whole family members can see as long as you're not. If you are married, then your family and your husband's family can see you with your hair. But
The
if
men
you're-
can't.
Yeah, but like if you're not married or outside men of those like groups are present, you have to cover your hair.
By the way, my son gave me grief for how long my hair is on Easter. He stopped by. He said, "Dad, because this experiment I'm playing with, I'm not female, but at the same time, I'm having fun trying to look how close I could get to Dumbledore. I'm not trying to look like Karl Marx."
You should braid it.
Yeah, you should braid it.
No.
No, do it.
But I pointed out to my son, look at Mom, because Mom hasn't been to a hairdresser since 3 years ago when COVID came out either, right? So her hair is, frankly, I'm enjoying it tremendously. That was one of the neat things when I married her. Her hair was so long, I had to help. As she took the brush and went as far as her arm would go, and I had to take it the rest of the way because she couldn't reach.
No.
And then as soon as we got married, and everything, boom, she got a haircut. What? And then boom, she got another haircut, and it kept getting shorter and shorter. It's a lot of work taking care of long hair.
She said, "I'm married, I don't need to try anymore."
How did you know?
My mom said the same thing.
Back to Marx. Back to Marx. So he's naturalized. He's naturalized Hegelianism, man as a species being.
Well, not
And
all of them, but
dialectical materialism is the title associated with it. The concept of alienation is that religion traditionally makes us feel alienated from ourselves because it makes us want to be less selfish, right? But he's never really pro-selfishness. And our objective being is the method of production, and labor is capitalism. So where has this gone? Obviously, Lenin takes it. For Marx, there was a set pattern that had to go, through this pattern, and you had to be capitalist first. So for him, communism occurs when a capitalistic society gets to the point where the tensions in that society are so great because of the owners owning everything and everyone else not having enough, right? And then you end up with literally a revolution, a physical revolution that transforms the society and does away with capital. And that's from his, pardon?
Eat the rich.
They're rich?
That was actually a religious movement in France, southern France, back in the Middle Ages.
Is that when?
Not a good one,
Took
didn't
heads
go
off?
very well.
That
No,
actually
that
rich.
was the French Revolution of 1789, and Robespierre. But in Middle Ages, there was a sect of French. They weren't the Huguenots. They were, but they were anti people that had wealth. And so they revolted and killed all the people with wealth. But then of course all the other people outside of that area where they had that came in and killed all of them. So yeah.
I'm not saying I agree with murder, but like Jeff Bezos, he doesn't need that much money.
There's
an idea.
Well, here is an example of someone who I highly recommend. Now remember, Marx's main book was called Das Kapital, or Capital, right? Which is not like DC is a capital, but it's capital as in funds, right? Money, right? But if you look up Thomas Piketty, and you could even go to a TED Talk. And which one is this? I already showed you this one? Okay. So his book is Capital. In the what? Let's get rid of the TED Talk and just put Capital. How do you spell capital? This is not his newest book anymore. So notice it's the same title as Marx's book, except he's updated it. It's in the 21st century now. And in this book, did I summarize it for you when we did his TED Talk?
No.
Okay, so the basic, this is quite a few years ago. That's the paperback. So the original was a summer before that and became a bestseller, which was weird. I walked into Barnes and Nobles and it was, right there at the front door, and I grabbed my copy, 20% off, and that could be funny if you're into capital, and how capital works. But basically, his survey of the data shows that there were the capitalist system always ends up with the wealthy at the top having most of the wealth and everyone else underneath. There was a period where that changed, and that happened as a result of World War I and World War II, both of which destroyed so much infrastructure and capital that everything kind of dropped down to a beginning, a zero again. And of course in the US that was especially good for us because we were one of the countries that were still whole, because we didn't have our industries destroyed. And in fact we doubled our employment because women started working in the factories, and when the war was over, most of those women actually stayed working. And so we ended up with two incomes, plus our economy was just really rolling and dynamic, because we were rebuilding Germany and rebuilding really even all of Europe. We were still helping Russia, plus we rebuilt Japan. Of course, once they all got rebuilt, then they started becoming competitors and our economy started going back down again.
I do think it's funny that we rebuilt Japan after we bombed them excessively.
It was a good thing for our economy. And they're still really very good friends. I mean, if your ancestors had been blown to smithereens by a physics experiment, yay, look! No Hiroshima! No Nagasaki! Wow, that was impressive, huh? Oh, look what we did to those people. Let's help them recover.
Hiroshima still exists. I've been there.
Yeah, you could visit the.
I went to the museum.
Yeah. But so our economy did great, and we end up growing a middle class, which is actually, if you look at statistics worldwide, there's no such thing anywhere else. We ended up with a middle class. And by the way, I'm a product of that. My parents were in that so-called middle class, lower middle class, I'm pretty sure, but nonetheless, they had enough that they bought a house, and then, and then, of course, we know all the redlining biz about who got to do that and so on. My dad was a veteran, so, he had benefits and so on. So we had the house, and so you end up with a certain class of individuals in the U.S. that built wealth over time, if they, were financially stable and so on. And remember the main things: get married, be industrious, be honest, and go to church once a week. Those are the 4 success characteristics that you could look at in data that's gathered by this guy. The way he was famous for the controversy associated with the bell curve. So when he wrote this book, he just stuck to Caucasians because he didn't want to get in trouble for people thinking that he was being racist. So he just stuck to white communities, specifically 2 white communities. One was Fishtown in Philadelphia, which I've been there. I almost always would get a McDonald's meal there after flying in at the airport, because that was on my way to my relative's house. We would not want to show up hungry, so we would get off the plane, get the rental car, drive to Fishtown. There was a McDonald's there before we went left on Cotman Boulevard, go out to etc. Right. So I'm familiar with Fishtown, and that was one of the places that he described as what happened when all of these things go wrong and it falls apart. And then the other communities are what are referred to as the super zips. What's the best?
You live in a super zip?
You don't. There are no super zips in Alaska, I checked. Just so you know. So you don't live in a super zip. God bless you. But you can. So you can check the maps where they've located the super zips. These are people that do all those 4 things right and also have quite a good education. In fact, in these households, typically the male has gone to either Harvard or Yale. The wife has gone to either Harvard or Yale, or both. You can go to both Harvard and Yale, right? Right? And as a result, you end up making a lot of money and investing and having property and raising children that will also do the same thing, right? So it's a class.
So you're saying we have no super zips in
We have no super zips in Alaska.
So goddamn expensive here.
Not even that, but if you go to Harvard or Yale, you seriously gotta move to Alaska after that?
There is a Harvard Club in
So
Anchorage,
pretty.
and in fact, it's so small that it's now a Harvard and Yale Club. It might be Princeton too, I forget, but it's basically the Ivy schools, people that have went to the Ivy. I did go to Princeton. I was there for about half an hour. I bought a scripture and some other little, things. By the way, it was the worst college bookstore I was ever in.
No, Princeton was awful. My therapist got accepted into Princeton, MIT, and Caltech, and she went to go visit Princeton, and they were awful. She said.
It's in New Jersey, right? What do you expect?
Joyzy, yeah, Joyzy.
Joyzy.
How is America, how is US the only place with a middle class? How does that make sense?
Well, because of the dynamic result of World War II and World War I, because there was some recovery after World War I of the wealthy class, but it was only after World War II that things began to build consistently again. But when we look now, the middle class stopped in the late 90s. So the characteristics that made the middle class growing and basically a class stopped in the end of the 90s. And if you're going to be in that class anymore, you have to be either a dentist or you have to be a IT person who is the kind of person that gets paid a lot for their skills in code writing. It's kind of interesting. There was an article just the other day about the Meta, the company, paying a few people just way more than usual because of their skills in what they're trying to do with the Oculus, which I love using and no one else does, which is weird. In any case, for the last 30 years or so, wages have stagnated. And so people in any other kind of employment are not going to be able to make it into that middle class unless they inherited wealth in one way or another in order to do that. Or they're like football or baseball stars that make millions, or they're movie stars that make millions. By the way, there's very few of those. They're the ones that make all the news. But if you feel like, well, I'm going to become a basketball player and make millions of dollars, you're looking at really an unusual opportunity to do that, because most basketball players never get that far. Plus, it's very hazardous life, I think. Lots of injury and so on.
We're seeing
And football too, yeah. I just picked basketball, but you can pick any